your hands together for today's guest, Cathesaurus. There she is. Yeah. Let's go. Ooh,
Why are you gay? Why are you gay?
Oh my god, I just love that Nigerian interview. Like it's so like the dude is so confounded. Like but it really does go to show how other countries view like homosexuality or the LGBTQ community, because it's like like he had no idea about anything, and this poor person, I believe he was talking to this poor trans man, was like on there like trying to do their thing, and he's just sitting there just like, what, why are you gay? Like, why did you choose this life for yourself? So it in some ways it does make me feel appreciative of places we can live without that kind of misunderstanding. I don't know what it is, that kind of hate, although it does exist in our places. But I don't know. How you doing, Kat? Can you hear me, Kat?
I'm doing good. Yeah. I suppose we can take the disguise off like this. Absolutely.
Everybody, Bane! Everybody, welcome Bane! Oh, I loved you. Thank you for wearing your what is that? Is that like a mask for like COVID?
Outstanding red leader.
Yeah. Was that like a mask for COVID?
So basically, I picked this up. I picked it. No. Sorry, I'm gonna have to just change which one I've got muted because you're delayed. So just give me a second.
Sure.
I'm gonna unmute this
Hey,
one.
Firehorse. Hibiscus.
The motherfucking thing. Language. Say something.
Something.
Excellent. Good. Right, we're on the same page now. Yeah. This actually isn't a COVID respirator. I picked this up beforehand. It's an exercise mask. And the idea behind this is that if you flip this switch here to that position, you get less air in. So it makes you work aerobically harder. So like if you go for a jog, it makes you feel like you're running, like sprinting down the bloody motorway. Plus, I also think it makes me look like Bane. And ever since I first saw Bane in The Dark Knight Rises, I've always kind of had a bit of a fantasy about being Bane. And sometimes it's good to just go amongst the people without them knowing who the hell you are and what the fuck you're about. And a respirator and goggles and what have you is good for that. So there you go.
I agree. That's why I like my clip-on sunglasses, because I just clip them on and I'm anonymous in the world, and that's how it goes. That's how it is. Kat, I'm super excited for you because I know that you've been a long time activist. You've been very much involved in politics, and especially in the UK. And you have decided that you had enough of their bullshit over there. And I would love for you to tell us a little bit more about what you have planned here in the future.
Okay. Well, you're going to have to pause me every 5 minutes or so, because if you remember, I can basically just talk forever without anybody having to say anything back. So if you need to get a word in, just kind of yell out, "Cat, shut the fuck up," or something like that.
I would never be so rude.
No. Well, pick a word that you're happy to. Yeah, that'll do it. If you wave your hands, then I'll know what you're about. Yeah, basically. So last time I was on, we were talking about things like break shite and what an absolute colossal fuck up that was always going to be, and was at that point, and is now, and has been ever since. But that's not really the topic for tonight. So I'm not really going to rehash anything that I spoke about last time, which was probably a relief. But here's the thing. Ever since December 2019, we've had a government, and I use the word loosely, of the Conservative Party, or the Conself-Servative Party, as I prefer to think of them, because that's really all they're about. They're about basically taking everything they can for themselves, for their overseas paymasters, and whether you believe that that's Putin because of the money that Russia put into their campaigns and that donates to various Conservative MPs, Conself-Servative MPs, or whether you think that it's from your neck of the woods and the coke sucker and his ilk of libertarian extremists. I mean, there's a fuck ton of dark overseas money flowing into UK politics, and the vast majority of it ends up in the coffers of the Conservative Party, and they used it to rob a referendum and basically to rob an election. And for the last, whatever it is now, 40 months, they have had an unassailable position in Parliament. They basically have a majority of 80 seats, give or take one or two, depending upon if people have died, or if there's or any of their MPs have been kicked out, or if there's a by-election happening. But basically, enough that even amongst that party that fights amongst itself all the time, they can always get their business through. So it really doesn't matter what all of the other opposition, what every other member of Parliament who is not a Conservative does. They can't stop the government doing anything it wants to. And the government has taken advantage of this to do whatever it wants to, and is basically ripping up what few remaining rights we have left after having been unceremoniously, booted ourselves out of the European Union. Now, there's a problem in the way the electoral system works here in the UK that has led to this situation. And with your permission, I just want to spend a couple of minutes and talk about just a couple of numbers and explain what this problem is and why it needs motivated, dedicated individuals to go in there and fix the fucking shit before it sinks. And on this particular occasion, one of the people who's going to put themselves into the fray to go and do this is me. So we'll explain about that in a second. So here's the thing. You can go back through the last 10, 15 years and look at the elections and figure out, how we got into the state that we got in. And basically speaking, the difference between elections in the UK and elections in the US, and since most of your audience comes from the US, I'm going to, kind of like compare and contrast with that, is this. In the US, you vote for your local congressman, you vote for your senator, you vote for the president, you vote for any number of resolutions and things that might be on. I mean, I don't know how long it takes you when you go to your polling place to fill in your ballot on election day, but I'm going to guess it takes a few minutes. Is that fair enough?
That is very fair.
Right. So in the UK, we don't do that, generally speaking. We have one box and one cross to mark, and that is we only vote for our member of parliament. So that's like our congressman. That is the person who is going to go to Parliament and allegedly represent our interests as residents of the constituency. So I live on the outskirts of a town called Gravesend, and the parliamentary constituency is Gravesham. Gravesham doesn't actually exist. It's the old kind of like Viking or what have you spelling for what the village that was there umpteen million years ago, but 1,000 years ago anyway. But anyway, so Gravesham. Now they're off for the United Kingdom, for the whole of the United Kingdom. So that's Great Britain and Northern Ireland. There are 650 members of Parliament. So we have 650 congressmen, basically, in the equivalent to your model. And we each get to vote for whoever represents the constituency in which we are registered to vote. I mean, heaven forbid that we do things like, some Republicans and vote in Florida and our home state and wherever we think, it might, because that would never happen. We'd never have electoral fraud on the part of the Republicans, would we?
Never.
I mean, never. And incidentally, it doesn't happen often over here, but that didn't stop the Conservatives. Oh, let's see, what are we pulling out of the right-wing playbook? Oh, I know, yes, voter suppression. Let's make it so that from the upcoming local elections, which will be at the beginning of May now, you've got to have photographic ID. So who doesn't, as a general rule, have photographic ID in this country? Well, it's going to be people who probably are at the lower end of the economic spectrum, who are probably not going to vote for the Conservatives in a month of Sundays. So let's get their votes out of the picture. Arsehole.
Wow.
You know.
So you guys still don't have IDs? No. Okay. So there's just to interject here for a second.
Yeah, no, carry on.
In the States, we have a movement here where people are. And you know, because we have that voter ID situation here, which has been in place for a while now. Now, there's a lot of black folks who get supposedly cut out of the equation because of that. But they're also finding, people of color are also finding it a bit insulting when people assume that they can't get an ID. And so, do you guys have that same sort of rhetoric going on there, where the people in maybe of the poor, because we're talking about, you know, the poorer people, do they get offended when people think that they can't get an ID? Like, because to me, it seems like most people can get IDs. I mean, it's not the hardest thing to do, and I get what you're saying, and I'm not taking sides here, but I'm just saying there is sort of a voice from the minority crowd who are like, "Hey, fuck you, we can get IDs." Like,
okay, so here's my first response. In all of the things that I say tonight, understand that I'm speaking for one person, and that's me. I'm not speaking on behalf of anybody else yet, because I haven't been elected to anything yet. So I am not going to take on some kind of like, I am not the lefty whisperer. I am not the what have you whisperer for any grouping. So you're just getting, you're getting my opinions.
Sure.
But there may come a time when I do speak on behalf of the people of Gravesham. And in actual fact, I believe that I will speak on behalf of the people of Gravesham, because I'm going to win this fucking thing.
Let's go.
And I'm then going to take this to Parliament along with other people who think that this has gone on long enough. So so basically what we get every year, or every time there's going to be an election, we get one of these. This is our polling card. And much like yourselves, we have to register to prove that we still live in the town and all the rest of it, and provide certain information. And that puts us on the electoral register once you're 18. Or 16 if you're in Scotland, because they're a bit more enlightened up there. A lot. But up to now, not only did you not need a photographic ID, you didn't even need to take this. You only had to go to your polling place, tell them who you were, they'd look it up on the list, and as long as that person hadn't already been in and used the vote, then that's it, you were cool. Now, there's a lot of problems with that. So do I personally think it's a bad thing to have photographic ID or some means of verifying that you're not voting for somebody else? I actually don't have a problem with it. That's not the issue. The issue is the timing of why it was done and the reasoning behind it. And they were saying, well, there was such a huge amount of voter fraud in the last election, blah, 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 that we're going to have to do it for this reason. And how many instances of voter fraud were there? I think it was 11. 11 votes across the entirety of the UK, which is, 70 million, give or take.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a big problem. I mean, that would have swung a lot of elections. But it might have swung a lot of elections, and that's where we get onto the question of our electoral system and how we return people to Parliament, and then how that turns into a government and all the rest of it. So I said I was going to hit you with some numbers. Let me hit you with some numbers.
Let's go.
In 2015, the Conservative, there was an election after 5 years of coalition government, because in 2010, the Conservatives did not get enough votes to be able to command a majority. You need 320. If there are 650 seats in Parliament, which there are, you need 325 is half of them plus one. So 326 seats to get a majority. And they didn't get a majority. They got 290 or something like that. And they were the largest party, but they couldn't command a majority. Therefore, they could not form a government in their own right. So they decided to try to form a coalition with the next biggest part, well, not the next biggest party. The next biggest party is Labour, and only in wartime has there ever been a coalition between the Conservatives and Labour, or between the top two parties of the day. It's happened during wartime twice, but it's never like during the First World War and the Second World War, but it wouldn't happen at any other time.
Wow.
Hopefully. I say hopefully because it's hard to tell the difference between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party these days, and that is actually a big part of the problem.
Yeah.
So, but moving back to the thing. So in 2015, the Conservatives won a majority, but not a large majority. They had like 330 or something like that. So they basically had a chance to form a government and hopefully get their business through. But David Cameron, who was the Prime Minister at the time, had made a commitment that he would offer a referendum to the nation on the subject of Brexit and to stop a rebellion amongst the right wing of his own party. They had to do that. We know what happened with that. And he then promptly resigned as Prime Minister because he'd said that he would see it through whatever happened, but he had been firmly on the side of remaining. He got completely outplayed by those who weren't. So the fucker went off and resigned and left it to, whoever was going to come next. And this is where the problems start to occur. Because in the UK, we don't vote for a prime minister. We don't vote for president. We only vote for our member of parliament. They all go to parliament. Whoever commands a majority, the leader of their party is the person who becomes prime minister. So in 2016, David Cameron became prime minister, but promptly resigned because as soon as after the referendum. So now the Conservative Party had to choose a new leader of their party, who would become the prime minister without any of us in the electorate having any say in it.
I see.
Right? Is that democratic? One might ask. I would say it isn't, but such is the system that we have. So they had an election process, and it came down to two final candidates. And before they could actually have an actual election between the voting membership of the Conservative Party to decide who their leader was, one of them dropped out. A woman called Andrea Leadsom. She'd written some fairly stupid things in the past about gay and lesbian people, and one of the Sunday papers found it. She had 3 or 4 days being hauled over the coals in the press. She didn't like it. She dropped out, leaving Theresa May as the last idiot standing. So she basically became prime minister without anybody really voting on it. So we had Theresa May for a couple of years. And what an entertaining couple of years they proved to be. But the best thing amongst many stupid things that she did was she decided to call a snap election in 2017 because she thought that the opinion polls showed that she could take her small majority, which was very difficult for her to manage because so many of the Conservative Party will rebel against the party line all the fucking time. They just never stop fighting amongst themselves. They're like a bunch of cats. They really are. So she decided to try and get a few more in her majority. And guess what? She turned her small majority into no majority whatsoever. She actually went down to 318. So now she was 8 MPs short of commanding a majority. So well played, Theresa May. Awesome. You are a complete political hero. She was dreadful. All right. So second of the 3 dreadful women prime ministers that the United Kingdom has had. Yes, we've had 3 women prime ministers, and they've all been an absolute fucking shambles, in my opinion. Such is the nature of things. So she had to form a coalition with somebody to have a chance of getting any business done. We are coming to a point. All right. I can see that you're thinking, Cat, shut up. But carry on. For a bit.
I'm listening to you.
Well, I'm kind of looking at chat, and I'm waiting for some of them to say, Cat, shut the fuck up.
They wouldn't dare.
They would. I would. So she formed a coalition with one of the smaller parties of the United Kingdom, the Democratic Unionist Party of Northern Ireland. I'm not here to comment on the nature of Northern Irish politics because I don't live there. I wasn't born there. It's none of my business. What it is my business to say is the DUP are absolutely fucking batshit crazy. They're basically, a combination of creationists and absolute anti-Republican, pro-remaining in the UK, what have you. And Theresa May formed a deal with them so that basically for a few £billion of money from Westminster and a commitment from the DUP that they would vote with the government when it came to passing its budget and on any issues, on any votes of no confidence in the government. It's what's known as a confidence and supply arrangement. That was all that they committed. They didn't commit to voting with the government when it wasn't to do with getting the budget passed, i.e. government being able to run the country, and it wasn't to do with anybody like the Labour Party trying to vote the government out of office. Okay? And they got a few £billion of investment for it. So you can say the DUP, they did all right.
Yeah, not a bad deal.
And then Theresa May basically spent 2 years trying to get to, what's the phrase? Oh yeah, get Brexit done. Yeah. And then trying to negotiate with the EU, because according to the rhetoric from the Brexit campaign, we held all the cards. It would be the easiest deal ever and crap like this, and it was none of those things. And the European Union realized that we were in a weak as shit position, and the Leave people had always known we should have. 2019, after 3 attempts to get the House of Commons to agree to the deal that she'd negotiated and failing, basically she was out of time. She was just fucking useless. So there had to be another leadership election. Guess what? Was the public going to be consulted about this one? No. Why? Because that's not how leaders of political parties get picked in this country. And this is where we have the era of Alexander Boris to Pfeffel Johnson.
My hero, that dude. But hey, to be fair, that dude was a fucking party machine during the pandemic. Like that dude was out there.
Oh, he loved. I mean, if there was a leaving do or some cake, dude was there. And fuck it, if there wasn't, he'd have his chief of staff organise one. Let's get out in the back garden and have some drinks. Let's do that. But you people out there, you poor people, you poors, if you go anywhere near another person or 2 other people, you're getting banged up. You want to go to your dad's funeral? Fuck that shit. Queenie wants to bury her husband when Prince Philip died. She sat in the pew alone. I mean, you want to see some leadership? I'm no royalist, okay? I really am not. But she showed it that day. All right, she sat there alone without any members of her family around her because she was adhering to the rules that everybody else in the country was adhering to, but not fuckface Alexander Boris to Pfeffel Johnson. Yeah. No, because nothing sticks to that shit. Yeah. Anyway, so a long story short, about 10 Conservative twats threw their hats in the ring. All of them dropped out until they got down the final 2. There was a vote put to the membership of the Conservative Party. Back comes Alexander Boris to Pfeffel Johnson as our Lord and Saviour to get Brexit done.
Amen.
And he then spent the next 5 or 6 months trying to get Brexit done and couldn't because he didn't have a majority in the House. Didn't have a majority. He was stuck in the same position. He was stuck in the situation that Theresa May had left him in, and the DUP didn't have to vote with him on matters of Brexit, and they wouldn't to leave because the DUP believe in staying in the European Union. They don't. They didn't want the UK staying together, I should say. And the problem with Brexit, any form of Brexit, was always going to put a dividing line between Northern Ireland and the rest of Europe because of the Good Friday Agreement. And peace in Northern Ireland in 1996-97 only came about because of the Good Friday Agreement, part of which was that Northern Ireland will be considered as part of the island of Ireland, and at some point in the future, should a majority of the population of Northern Ireland decide that they wish to, become part of the Republic, i.e. everything else, then that could take place. This meant that any Brexit was going to be hugely problematic for Northern Ireland, and which is exactly what's happened. But again, this isn't really talking about Brexit. Boris Johnson realised that he could get nothing done while he didn't have a majority. He wanted, therefore, to call an early election, but here's the problem. He couldn't, because the power to call an early election was taken away from prime ministers as a result of the 5-year coalition government from 2010 to 2015. The Liberal Democrats had said, we'll enter into a coalition with you, but we want 5 years. We don't want you deciding after 18 months, well, actually, we're doing all right in the opinion polls now. Let's kick these liberals into touch, and call an election. So they passed something called the Fixed Term Parliaments Act, which meant that there had to be 5 years, unless a majority of the House agreed to allow an early election. So Alexander Boris de Pfeffel Johnson, let's give him his full name because it's ridiculous and I like saying it, especially the de Pfeffel part, because who the fuck walks around with the middle name of de Pfeffel? Well, Alexander Boris de Pfeffel does. So let's have it. Let's make sure that we get that fat fucker's name out there at every opportunity. It's his name. It's not like I'm insulting him.
Yeah, I mean the name is insulting enough. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, well, quite exactly. So he tried. He came to Parliament twice and said, "I would like to call an early election." And guess what? Everyone on the other side said, "No, we're enjoying this. You can't get anything done. It's quite fun. We'll carry on." In the event, the leader of the Labour Party at the time, Jeremy Corbyn, finally agreed to allow the Conservatives to call an early election for reasons. I didn't agree with them. I think they should have just basically made Alexander Boris de Pfeffel Johnson's, twirl on a spit with fat dripping on him and a furnace underneath for the, probably the rest of the time. Wasn't down to me. I wasn't an MP, so nothing I could do about it. The election was called. It took place in December, and there was a landslide. Okay, so whereas they had 318 seats, the Conservatives ended up with 364. So 364, do the electoral maths, 364, 366. Yeah, they ended up with an 80-seat majority, which meant that 79 of their own members could rebel against the government and the government could still get its business through. All right. So nothing that any of the other parties could do. But the interesting part is this. How did the votes change between 2017, when they got 318, and 2019, when they got this huge landslide? And here's how it changed. They went from 42.2% of the total vote of the United Kingdom, so well less than half. They went from 42.2 to 43.4. They picked up 1.2% additional votes that they didn't have in 2017. And from that, they picked up an extra 48 seats, which gave them an 80-seat majority in Parliament. Okay. Why? Well, that's the problem of first past the post. For comparison, the party that did best in terms of electoral swings in 2019 was the Liberal Democrats. They increased their share of the vote by 4.2%. So they picked up 3.5 times as many extra votes as the Conservative Party. So how many extra MPs do you think the Liberal Democrats got for picking up 3.5 times as many more votes as the Conservatives did?
I don't know.
Well, exactly. Well, it was a trick question because I didn't pick up any. They actually lost a member of Parliament. They went down. They got 3.5 times as many more new votes as the Conservatives, and they lost a seat. The Conservatives picked up 1.2%, and they got 48 extra seats. This is and ended up with this unassailable majority, and have been raping and pillaging and plundering and fucking riding roughshod over everything ever since. This cannot be allowed to happen again. We have to move away from a situation. We have, as a priority, to move away from a situation where 43.4% of the vote, not even half of the country, can end up with somebody having an 80-seat unassailable majority in Parliament. Do you see why that would be a bad thing? Do you see why it cannot ever be allowed to happen again?
Yeah.
Or am I just talking to myself?
No. I do see. Yeah. I mean, like, that means that they just have power, constant power to do whatever they want for whatever, and not truly representing the people and what they want.
Sorry, I'm just seeing something that what's his face, Moving Dutchman, has written in here. Go Maggie. If that's a reference to Maggie Thatcher, I'm glad that she has gone. Absolutely. She should have gone into the sea many years before she did go. And I was one of many people who celebrated when she did go. And I did buy a copy of Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead, which was actually released the week that she died, in celebration, even though the BBC decided that that was a bit cruel and they wouldn't actually recognise that as the official #1 on the BBC music charts that week. But there was those kind of protests that actually I really appreciate about UK music. But anyway, it's neither here nor there. So the way that first past the post. So in my constituency, whoever gets the most votes becomes the member of parliament, whether they win by 1 vote or 20,000 votes. I mean, if it's by 1 vote, there's probably going to be a recount or 2 until eventually people will agree. Or even on occasions, they've decided it on the flip of a coin. It has happened, you know, that they'll have 3 or 4 recounts. They can't separate them. They'll do a coin toss and that's it. The only people that therefore whose votes matter are the people for the candidate that comes first. Everybody else's vote in that constituency counts for nothing. So you can win a constituency with, say, 35% of the vote. 65% of the votes cast in Gravesham last time around didn't count for anything. They don't add to the number of seats. They don't add to the chances of your party or anything. So we had this ludicrous situation where a succession of minority votes in certain constituencies. Stop me if this sounds familiar. Imagine a situation where a party in power could redraw electoral boundaries in such a way that a minority vote within that constituency could actually guarantee, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, that would never happen, would it?
No,
I mean, we'd never have that. Nobody would create the term gerrymandering to describe that, because why would you pick a fucking stupid name like that for something that would never happen?
Right.
Well,
so it's the same shit. It's the same shit.
It's the same shit, but it's worse because you at least get a chance to vote for president. You might not like the choices put to you. I mean, between the former guy and Sleepy Joe, as I know you like to think of him, you know, you might not think that you got much of a choice, but you get a choice. Yeah. You do get a choice. We don't. You know, and we have a situation where, okay, during a general election, we know who the current leader of the Conservative Party is, or the current leader of the Labour Party is. But if they decide then after that to change that, you know, unless you're a member of that political party, you get no say whatsoever. Wow. And if you're a member of the political party, you might not get a say if there's only one candidate, which is what happened with Theresa May. Nobody other than the few hundred MPs in Westminster voted for her. And it showed because she was fucking awful. She really was.
Yeah. So then what would you suggest to change all this?
Yes. So basically, it's very simple. It's the process that's required is called electoral reform, and it basically moves to a voting system where everybody's votes are counted. Everybody's votes matter. And it's the kind of electoral system that's been used for years. Hold on, where's that place? Oh, Europe. Yes, we do love Europe. We do love Europe, don't we? But we voted for our members of the European Parliament for years using proportional representation. And indeed, in certain circumstances in the United Kingdom, we use proportional representation, but not for the election of members of Parliament. Now, there are many different ways of doing it. And part of the challenge is finding a way that people can A, understand, that B, you don't need a degree to kind of decipher what the end result is. You know, it should be as simple as possible for people to, and as transparent as possible. But we need to have a situation where if 35% only vote for the first choice candidate for their candidate, that candidate shouldn't get in or having only garnered 35% of the first choices. So one system, and this is just an example. So one system that is used a lot is called the STV, the single transferable vote. And it works like this. Instead of putting an X against the one name that I want to have returned as my member of parliament, I have to rank all the people that stand. So if there are 5 candidates on the paper, I have to pick my first choice, my second choice, my third choice, and so forth. The guiding principle of the single transferable vote is that your second, third, fourth, and fifth can never hurt your first choice. your third choice can never hurt your second, and so forth. But in the event that your first choice doesn't, have enough votes, then everybody's second preference votes will be counted. So let's say we've got a candidate who gets 35% of the first choices, all right? So they haven't won the seat. Well, now you add up the second choice votes and you add those to the totals. And as soon as somebody goes over 50%, you have a winner. If it doesn't happen on the second round, then you look at the third choices and so on and so forth. So your second, third, fourth, excuse me, fifth choice votes only counts if people aren't getting through the first time around. But once you have somebody that crosses the line with 50% plus one, then they've actually got there based upon not just the people who wanted them more than anything, but who also ranked them higher than Joe Fucknuts from the Monster Raising Loony Party or whoever. So actually people's votes matter.
Mm-hmm.
You get a candidate that has actually kind of carried the will of a majority of the population rather than just got more than the next person, but far less than a complete majority in their own right. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So if we do that, then really two things fall out of it. We suddenly end up with a situation where we're unlikely to have as many gerrymandered results because gerrymandering doesn't really work with a single transferable vote. Now, ask yourself this question. Based on what I've just said, do you think the Conservative Party support electoral reform or a move away from the first past the post system?
No, why would they?
Well, precisely. Turkeys, as a rule, don't vote for Christmas. But the next problem is, well, what about the Labour Party? Would they vote for Christmas? And the answer there is, well, no, they won't either. Because the only people who benefit under first past the post are the two largest parties. No other party benefits. All right. So therefore, the two largest parties are never going to vote for it. And Labour policy is to not, move away from first past the post. Now, you could look at all the rest of the parties and say, well, what about them? Do they all support electoral reform and some form of proportional representation? The short answer to that is yes, most of them do. There are a couple of, oddball outliers, usually in Northern Ireland. But, such is the nature of things. But that is their right to think differently. However, if you looked at the total vote share of the parties, you would find, so let's say that if you assume that there is a one-to-one mapping between people voting for Conservative and Labour being people who don't want electoral reform and everybody else being people who do want, it's a lot closer than you might imagine. If you also bear in mind the fact that there are plenty of people within Labour and plenty of individual Conservative voters who think that this situation is fucking stupid, especially when it means that a member of the other party or the other party is in government for 5 years. Actually, there is a will for making this kind of electoral reform. The problem is making it happen. To make it happen, you need 326 people or more in Parliament who will actually commit to voting for electoral reform. That means we need more people in Parliament who are not going to take just the Conservative Party line or the Labour Party line if this subject comes in. And that's why people like me have to stand up in, if not under a unified party, then at least stand up on a platform of saying our first order of business will be to effect electoral reform. That will ensure that every government we get thereafter can be truly reflective of the people and prevent a situation where a 43.4% vote share gives you an unassailable 80-seat majority. That stops a government like the Conservative Party of the last 40 months from basically taking close to £500 billion and stealing it away from the public purse. And that's the current running total. All right, and I nearly said that's a conservative total. Yes, it is a conservative total. It's the total of how much money those fuckers have basically stolen from the electorate. And I think the electorate, more of them are catching on to this. All right. We saw what happened during the pandemic with government awarding itself and its mates hundreds of millions of of contracts for vastly overpriced personal protective equipment that was not fit for purpose, that was never used, but was billed for and paid for. And there are some fairly, shall we say, prominent names, both within the still within the government, or still within the Conservative Party, or who were elected to Lords, really, as a way of saying, thank you, who are in trouble as a result of this. And every single one of them should be in the dock, in the Old Bailey, and if I had my way, either tarred and feathered and run naked out of London and forced to jump in the sea and stay there for like a year, or at the very least spend time, banged up. And I will quite happily go after every single motherfucker who has stolen, for malfeasance in public office, and I don't see why other people shouldn't either. So if I sound a little bit strident about this, and I've kind of got a bit, stick up my arse and be in a bonnet about it, well, I have, because it doesn't matter to me. I'm old. You can probably tell from the grey. I haven't got any colour and what have you. I'm 59, all right, and I'm not in the greatest of physical health, and that isn't going to get any better, sadly. But what I do have, and you've probably picked up on this, is I'm not shy in front of a camera. I'm not shy in front of a microphone. I know how to, keep my thoughts in line and have my facts and figures ready. Put on a platform next to Adam Holloway, who is the current Member of Parliament for Gravesham, who has had that position for 18 years, who has in that time made one tweet about his activities as a Member of Parliament. I can't comment about what he's put on his Facebook page because I don't do Facebook. For a whole bunch of reasons, including the fact that Meta and Cambridge Analytics and what have you used Facebook to steal that motherfucking referendum in the first place in 2016. So I quit Facebook over that, and nothing will ever make me go back.
Yeah,
looks like you weren't. Yeah, fucking evil. I mean, seriously evil, and I won't touch it. So therefore, I can't go to Adam Holloway's page, but I can tell you what he's done, which is the square root of fuck all, except stand up for one of the local MPs, a guy called Charlie Elphick, who was the Member of Parliament for Dover. Charlie Elphick ended up going to prison for criminal activities, and he deserved to go to prison. But who were the people who were standing up for him? Yeah, locals, including Adam Holloway. What a fucking hero.
Our hero, Robbie.
Yeah, our hero. But it gets even better. I mean, Charlie Elphick. So he's going to get he is going to prison. He can't carry on as Member of Parliament. So who becomes Member of Parliament in his place? His wife.
Oh Lord!
His wife takes over.
How the hell does that work? How does that work,
dude?
Does she run
don't
or
even go there?
Okay, fine.
Is she what? No, she's an idiot. Is what she is.
But no, does she run though? Like, there's no vote for?
She was selected to run, and she was elected eventually at an election. So fair play. Can't say that she didn't. Once she'd gone through an electoral process, that's fine. But fortunately, there had to be a by-election. But it was the way that they just basically picked her. Well, all right, we can't have Elphick. Let's have Mrs. Elphick. And when he's banged up in prison, and they got divorced. But was it a divorce of convenience or what have you? And if you look at some of the financial shenanigans that went on, which is partly why he was put away in the first place, it makes you wonder. But I don't really wish to get slapped with a libel suit, because not that I don't have the truth on my side, but I just ain't got the time. I've got bigger fish to fry.
I understand. So I'm curious then. So besides election reform, what else would you bring to the table as a Member of Parliament?
Okay, well, number one, you can probably tell that I'm not the world's greatest fan of Brexit. So, at the appropriate time, should we start making moves towards going back down that line, then of course you could expect that. But here is but I'll answer your question in a better way.
Sure.
If the first priority of a government or a parliament of which I was a member was to effect electoral reform, and we passed the legislation to effect electoral reform, what should then be the next thing that happens?
Eliminate the Brexit, go back into the European Union?
Even before that, because how do we know that what we think? I mean, I personally might not be in favour of Brexit. I mean, there's no might about it. I thought it was a terrible, but 70% of the people in this area voted in favour of it in 2016. So where I am in Kent is the closest to France. It's the route where most of what the government refers to as illegal asylum seekers come in. Now, just for a second, there's no such thing as an illegal asylum seeker. There are asylum seekers. They may be using desperate means to get here, but there's a reason for that, which is the government doesn't provide undesperate means for them legal means to take advantage of elsewhere. They are perfectly entitled to want to come here. The government doesn't want them here, because foreigners, the government doesn't like foreigners.
Yeah, others.
Even though it takes it. Well, I mean, you can pick a word you like.
Yeah.
I mean, they'll say, but look, we have a black prime minister. Look, we have black people in parliament, or people from other cultures, this, that, or the other. Yeah, you do. All right. But they ain't people who are necessarily looking out for other people who share their skin tone or their racial background. All right. Far from it. And I mean, I'm just going to throw the name Suella Braverman out there and say that, yes, she has the pigment of somebody from overseas because her family were immigrants, economic immigrants from Uganda at a time when Uganda wasn't a great place for people of non-African descent to be. And they came here, as they were entitled to do. But the problem with Suella Braverman is that she now wants to draw the ladder up behind her. She's here. She's got hers. So fuck everybody else who might want to come here, from Uganda or really anywhere else. If they're not rich and if they're not putting money in the Conservative Party or her pocket, she doesn't want to fucking know about it. It's worth also remembering that where do most of these illegal asylum seekers come from? They come from parts of the world like Afghanistan or Iraq or Yemen, or where, let's see, why will people, wars caused by Western governments with an eye, so this is a fucking, it is a rod. It's a rod of our own making being used to beat ourselves on the back, but they jump on it because as they discovered during Brexit, if we talk about beating back the foreigners and getting them out the country, that goes along well with the knuckle dragging, more harder thinking sections of society that will tend to, shag the flag and vote the right way as far as they're concerned. Right. But that's not a majority. That isn't a majority of this country. No. So no. The answer to my trick question is this: if enough people get into to effect electoral reform to bring in place, let's say, a move to the single transferable vote, what that parliament should then do is call an election under those new rules, get a representative parliament in that has been voted in under proportional representation rules, and it is now up to them to decide what to do next. Now, the problem with saying that is if you say to people, well, we're going to have an election, we're going to prioritize doing this one thing, we'll fight what other fires we have to in the meantime, and then there'll be another election. Most people, oh, no, I don't want to do 2 elections in a year kind of thing, or what have you. But the fact is, if you can get across that what they will then end up with is that their vote, everybody's vote, and all of their vote will have been counted and will be represented, and there won't be the chance of an Alexander Boris to Pfeffel Johnson leading a tiny, 43.4% share of the popular vote. Excuse me, and turning that into an absolutely unassailable criminal cartel in government where nothing anybody can do can boot them out because there's no oversight, because we don't have a constitution of checks and balances that stops dishonorable people. We don't. That's another thing that could usefully be something that a government, if not necessarily the first one that brings about electoral reform, should address, which is, we can do away with this notion. I mean, have you ever watched proceedings in the House of Commons? I'm guessing you probably have. And they'll hear them going, order, and the speaker in the background.
I like how they yell at each other.
They're yelling at each other, but you're not allowed to call somebody a liar.
Yeah.
All right. You can say that he is factually, his facts don't match up with this or that. But if you call them a liar, you're going to get booted out of the House. Why? Because it is what is it? Indecorous. That's the word they use. It is indecorous to call another member of the House a liar, because the assumption is that all members of the House of Commons are honourable. That historic convention, which is enshrined in the Book of Words, the kind of like the Robert's Rules of Order of the Parliament, which is called Erskine may have applied in the 16th, the 17th, the 18th, the 19th, possibly even the 20th century. But if there is anything that the last 13 years of either conservative joint coalition governments or conservative majority governments has shown us, is that these fuckers have no honour. You cannot have checks and balances that depend upon honourable people when people from the Prime Minister, Alexander Boris de Pfeffel Johnson downwards, will lie again, lie about the fact that they've lied, and lie to themselves the fact that they ever lied in the first place.
Yeah.
You know, you've just thrown away any semblance of checks and balances and control. You don't have it. So we need better checks and balances. You have them in the United States. I mean, I like to sort of sit here from across the pond and snipe about things like gun control this and your health system that and all the rest of it. We'll come back to the health system possibly. But the fact remains, you know, that you do have the three parts of government. You have the legislative, you have the executive, and you have the judicial.
Oh, judicial.
Well, executive.
You said
judicial and you know, the three
The
parts.
three,
anyway. Yeah, and really near the throne shall meet and all the rest of it, and it kind of works.
Kind of. I mean it's pretty corrupt.
I did say kind of.
Yeah, I know.
But it works better than ours because we ain't got one. You know,
right.
We didn't need that because we had honourable members of Parliament, right. And we got Erskine May telling us that because we're all honourable, we can't call people a liar. You know, we can't use words like that because it's indecorous. And who the fuck wants to be indecorous? Well, I do, actually, as a matter of fact. You may have noticed I drop the occasional F-bomb and stuff like that. Would I drop the occasional F-bomb in Parliament? Yeah, probably. When exercised sufficiently. Am I going to sufficiently break the rules to get a suspension of more than 10 days from the House of Commons? No. Why? Because that could then lead to me being booted out and as an MP. But this leads on to another part of something that we should usefully do in Parliament, or that members of Parliament should do on behalf of their constituents, which is actually work for them and not for the people who are their second, third, fourth, fifth job holders. So during, for example, and this is just one example, during the pandemic, on the Conservative side, there was a member of Parliament called Sir Geoffrey Cox. Now, Sir Geoffrey Cox is a legal person, a solicitor, and he was actually being retained at that moment by the government of Bermuda to help with some Bermudan legislation, what have you. So Geoffrey Cox, during most of the first lockdown, was actually in Bermuda, very nice, getting paid, you know, millions, I think, of pounds for doing that as his second job, while actually being, you know, also the member of Parliament for his constituency in the United Kingdom. So anybody who voted for him in his constituency, and I can't for the life of me remember which one it is, but it'll be some fucking conservative twat place. So really, who cares about them? Well, they probably do. I don't. But, you know, they choose to live there. They chose to vote the fat fucker in. So that's their fault. But they weren't exactly getting represented. Because not only was he not there for them to go and see and say, I've got this problem with my drains, or any of the things that you can go to your local member of Parliament about and have them, you know, take up on your behalf. Good luck when he's in Bermuda and then coming back from Bermuda. And good luck when he's more focused on that, his second job. So here are some things that I would like to change about the way that members of Parliament operate. And to make it more than an academic exercise, these are the conditions under which I will run and which I think will appeal to more than perhaps a few voters of Gravesham. So let's just start from the top. How much do members of Parliament get paid? Well, I won't expect you to know this, but it's £84,000 salary, starting salary. Okay, that's quite a lot of wedge. Yeah. That's about 3 times what your average person in the UK is getting.
Wow.
Now, they will say they don't set their own salaries. There is an independent pay review board that decides what MPs should get. I think £84,000 is too much money for what they do. I think to myself, let's think of a job, let's think of a profession that has as much responsibility, as much importance to the life of the nation. And I think to myself, qualified nurses. Let's say that I've gone to university and I've got a degree, which you have to be a nurse in the United Kingdom. And let's say I've got 5 years experience. That's probably about a similar level of responsibility on a day-to-day basis of people's lives. So I've always said that I think the salaries of MPs should be tied either to a specific job in the public sector or to a kind of like a basket of equivalent jobs in the public sector for 2 reasons. Because number one, it's not fair that they should be getting 84,000 a year when people with far more responsibility are getting maybe a third of that. Number two, at the moment, if we went to the government and said to them, do you not think you could maybe increase nurses' pay a bit? Government isn't going to do much about it. At the moment, this is happening in a whole bunch of public sector areas, including for nurses and other public sector employees in the United Kingdom. And basically, the nurses are being offered a 5% increase, which, given that our cost of living has gone up anywhere from 15 to 20%, and our fuel bills are like, way up there, 5% doesn't really cut it. Now, if you imagine, however, that the salary of an MP was tied to the salary of a 5-year qualified nurse, what do you think would happen to nurses' salaries under a...
Yeah. They
You
go
see
on.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right. So if we want to pay nurses more, let's make sure that we pay members of parliament the same. So my first commitment to the people of Gravesend is that I won't take 84,000 as my salary. I will take the salary of a 5-year qualified nurse, and that is the only salary that I will draw. What happens to the rest of that 84,000? We will come to. Number two, what else do members of parliament get? They get subsidised bars and restaurants in the House of Commons, in the Palace of Westminster. So they pay basically like a third. So they'll be having fantastic meals catered for them every day, and the finest wines known to humanity. And we want them here, and we want them now, and all the rest of it, and paying nothing for it. So I will commit to the people of Gravesend that I will not benefit from the subsidized rates of those restaurants. If I take a meal in a restaurant, then I will pay the price that is asked of me, and the rest of it will get paid into a fund which the people of Gravesend can decide, or Gravesham can decide where it should go. So I'm going to pay full whack for whatever I do. Here's the third thing: expenses. How much expenses do members of parliament earn? And well, really, it depends. Some of them only claim a few £100,000 worth of expenses. Some of them considerably more. The kind of things that get paid on expenses or get claimed on expenses by members of parliament currently, including £7,000 from one of the government's ministers to heat the horses in his stables. Put that through as an expense, a legitimate. You think I'm making it up? I am not.
I don't.
Right. So basically, there's a degree of lining of pockets, shall we say? So here are the kind of things that members of parliament will do in order to, as if 84,000 plus whatever they're getting from their second, third, fourth, and fifth jobs. Because by the way, they're not stopped from having second, third, fourth, and fifth jobs, which might be in complete competition or conflict of interest with their role as representatives of the people who vote them into office. So apart from anything else, I won't have a second or a third or a fourth or a fifth job. When they elect me as a member of parliament, I will do one thing, which is represent them in parliament, represent every one of my constituents to the absolute limit of my ability, and whatever time is left over after that, campaign tirelessly for electoral reform and campaign ruthlessly to get every one of these feeding motherfuckers who have lined their pockets over the last 3, 5, 8, 13 years and see them where they deserve to be, which is in court on trial for malfeasance in public office. Okay.
Do you guys have term limits? I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you guys have?
No, we don't.
Oh,
no.
Jesus.
Well, for example, the motherfucker Adam Holloway,
Yeah.
who's been foisted on this place since 2005, has been here for 18 years. I mean, he could pull a bloody, what's his face, Mitch McConnell.
Yeah.
How long's, I mean, about 7 centuries he's been there for Kentucky or something.
Yeah.
You know, there's no, we don't have term limits.
Mm.
Well, rather we do. They're called elections. You have an election
I
and then you
see.
get a chance to boot people out. I'm thinking that there should be slightly shorter term limits. In the sense of, I think that once a member of parliament is elected to go to represent people, that it should continue to represent people and listen to its people. And I have a plan for that as well, because of course I do, because I didn't sit down and write this on the back of a fucking napkin. You know, the point of doing this is not to aggrandize me or to make me famous, because quite honestly, I don't think I don't expect to be around for that many more years.
Well, that's
sad. Well, yeah, we don't have to talk about that. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
I have a nephew. A great nephew now. My niece, the youngest of my nieces, had a son last year. He's now 10 months old. Okay, and he's had some severe medical problems for the first few months of his life. Okay, they're getting over it now. What they are is not relevant. You know, this is not that. But in my mind, I have his image right here, and I'm thinking to myself, this country at the moment is not fit for you. You know, the health service is on its knees because the fucking self-servitive government wants to sell it to American HMOs. You know, pocket the proceeds and then walk off into some tax haven overseas and, you know, live out the rest of their years without giving a flying fuck about what happens in this country. Well, that's not on. You know, the National Health Service was basically created and given to the people of the United Kingdom as a thank you by the Labour Party that came in after the end of the Second World War for the 6 years of privation that this country suffered during the Second World War as this little island on the outpost of Europe when, you know, Adolf with the was going around, you know, basically killing and destroying everything that he could.
Right.
The National Health Service was given to this country. It is not the Conservatives to sell for their own profit. It never has been, and they will do it over my dead body. And the way things are going, you know, it probably will be over my dead body. But, you know, it ain't going down without a fight.
Yeah.
And I'm not the only person in this country that thinks that the NHS is not just a bridge too far; it's a whole motherfucking river too far. You know, so they should hands off on that one, which comes back again to why I talk about the salary of a 5-year qualified nurse as being a good benchmark, because without people like that, what have we got left? You know, so we have a situation where the National Health Service is not fit for purpose for my 10-year-old great nephew and the medical problems that he's had. The school system is not fit for purpose. How is he going to get the kind of education that I was the beneficiary of? Now, I didn't go to a private school. You know, I went to a state school like everybody else, but I had between my ears an organ that decided it just loved absorbing knowledge. So I was then able to turn that into going to university. I didn't have, you know, a scholarship or what have you to get me through university, but at the time that I went, you know, there was at least a semblance of a grant from the government. So I had a few £100 the first year, half of that the second year, and no grant whatsoever in my third year. But I didn't have to pay tuition fees. So on the plus side, I didn't have to pay for my tuition, but on the minus side, neither could I get a loan to cover me for the time that I was there. So I actually had to work while I was at university, and I did. I took the Queen's shilling and put on the uniform, and I served some time in the reserve forces, and I did enough by doing that to basically get to the end of my degree, take my degree, and go on and use it.
What's your degree in, by the way?
Well, what do you think? And what would you guess?
I don't know. Business finances? I don't know.
Nope. What my brother referred to as hard sums. I did mathematics.
Okay.
Yeah, I did that at Cambridge, and the only reason I say that is because, you know, I got to Cambridge through my own efforts without the benefit of public school and, you know, all of the kind of crap that the David Camerons and the Alexander Boris de Pfeffel Johnsons and all those other, you know, millionaire government ministers
Yeah.
did. No, I did it through my own efforts, and I got my degree. And what have I done since? I've used it, or abused it, or completely ignored it as my interests or the needs of the situation arose. But I want my 10-month-old great nephew to have the chance to go to Cambridge if that's what he wants to do, or to go to Oxford, or to go to the local art college if he wants to be a painter, or to go to, I don't know, building school if he wants to be a builder. Whatever he wants to do, we need to have in place an environment and an economic system that means that he can get it, that if he's good enough and he works hard enough, that he can get a chance or make a chance for himself. Is that the nation we have at the moment? It isn't. It used to be back in my day. I mean, back when I was young. And I want it back for him. So as I say, so he basically is the touchstone for me of the challenges, of the many challenges we face. And you asked me earlier, what's going to be the number 2 thing you do and the number 3 thing? And I said, well, the first thing I'd do is I'd call another election and get people in place. But then they've got to start addressing those problems. Now, would I stand a second time? Yeah, sure. If I'm still healthy enough and all the rest of it, yeah. I think that I have things to contribute in this, in terms of ideas, in terms of passion, in terms of the ability to get in front of a camera and actually answer the fucking question that has been asked, and not what the party line is. I don't have to spout a party line because I'm not a member of a political party. And there is no political party that currently exists that I could join and with good conscience stand on a platform for. I wish there was. In no universe that can be imagined would I ever stand for the Conservatives. No fucking way. And since the Labour Party at the moment are basically indistinguishable they are, that's my opinion, and there are going to be Labour voters out there who are going to disagree with that, and that's fine. I'm just seeing if there are any in here. No, can't see any. That's good. We're not really talking about whatever's being said or not said in chat. I'm kind of depending upon you to keep an eye on that.
Oh yeah,
I don't know if you are. Yeah.
You had someone, Lola came in and said hi to you.
Oh, okay, cool. What was I saying? I've just distracted myself. Give me a second.
Yeah, that's.
It was about my nephew. It was about
the second thing you were gonna do.
Yeah. Right. So I think that members of Parliament should not be voted in once at the beginning of a 5-year term and then really do whatever the fuck they want for the next 5 years. They should be beholden to and really influenced by what their constituents think, to the extent that their constituents want to be involved. Now, not everybody is going to want to be a part of an ongoing political decision-making process, but if they are, and if there are people in the constituency of Gravesham who want to be a bit more hands-on, who want to say, for example, well, that money that you're putting in, from not taking advantage of the subsidised restaurants and the subsidised bars. I mean, it's a bit stiff to ask me to, give up on subsidised, beer and what have you. Not that I drink a lot, but it's, occasionally. But I'm going to do that because I think it's wrong that they should have that privilege. So it should be the people of Gravesham. I've used that before. Now, how do you gather the electorate or the people in Gravesham and give them that kind of democratic voice in a way that doesn't require them all to come in and wave their hands every 5 minutes? Is there a way, perchance, some form of technology, some device that many people carry around with them that could be used as a means of expressing their desires on an issue or 2 or 10 from time to time? Fuck me, there is.
Yeah.
We have smartphones. We have the technology. We have the intertubes. It is not beyond the wit of man or woman to come up with a solution that basically allows democracy to flow from down there up through its representatives into the House of Commons, into the decisions that government makes on behalf of the people of the country it's supposed to represent, not on behalf of the people who bankrolled it in the form of, Putin or Pope sucker. I used to love saying Coke suckers, but fortunately one of them died a few years back, so now there's only one bad one left. Hopefully he won't be around for much longer, and then then he'll be off, and then we'll only have people like, I don't know, Steve Bannon, Grover Norquist, that twat Candace Owens, and all of those kind of people, or their representatives here in the United Kingdom. Hello Matthew, hello Sarah. We'll speak again. So I'm basically setting my stall out as going after all of these cunts because that's what they are, and they need to get their money out of our politics. So, that's another thing I won't take. I won't take any donations from overseas. Now, you might think, yeah, but you wouldn't get any. Let me head you off at the pass, because the moment I told some of my friends who are in America, they're saying, well, what have you got a GoFundMe? Can we chip in? And I said, fuck off. No. Part of the problem, one of the biggest problems that we have in this country, is the amount of foreign money that's here that shouldn't be. So I'm not going to take a donation from my pals in Colorado or elsewhere. Stick it in your pants. Go and do something useful for it in Colorado. No, I will raise my own money here in the United Kingdom. Now, one of the things that people use the expenses for, technically, is to have a staff, for example, to run a constituency office, to deal with members of the constituency on a day-to-day basis, assuming that the Member of Parliament might be up in Westminster, actually doing the business of MP in government, and not on their second, third, fourth, or fifth job on the board of a company or a bank or the government of Bermuda or whatever the fuck else they're all up to, or writing books and columns for the Telegraph, Mr. Alexander Boris de Pfeffel Johnson and Mr. David Cameron, and it's just, to me, it's fucking ludicrous.
Yeah.
That these people are elected and sent to Westminster and are supposed to be the best and the brightest, and they're so bloody incompetent they can't make £84,000 stretch to covering their bills. So they'll do things like this. They will buy second homes in London, which they will then rent to each other, and that rent then gets claimed on expenses. And the financing costs of buying those second homes in London, well, guess where? Taxpayers picking that up as well. So there are so many of these fiddles going on. And there was a big scandal in the United Kingdom around about 2010, 2011. And it was all supposed to be sorted out. The members of Parliament weren't going to be able to fiddle their expenses anymore. And now you look at it and you see just how many hundreds of thousands some of these people are claiming every year, on top of their 84,000 salary, and on top of their subsidised restaurants and bars, and on top of all the freebies and the, what do they call them, fact-finding visits to, I don't know, Aruba, or some really important place that they've got to go to discover how to dot the I's and tie the shoelaces. And by the way, can we just wine you and dine you and have you lobby for our fuck that shit.
Yeah.
All right. There is. I mean, if what was that phrase that Trump came up with? Draining the swamp.
Yeah.
All right. There is a swamp sitting in the Palace of Westminster at the moment, and if we don't rise up as a people and burn that place down before the Conservatives are out of office, then by December of next year, so 18 months, 20 months, whatever it is, they will have to call an election. Between now and then, they will have to call an election. The way the opinion polls are at the moment, they will lose that election. They will lose big, and they know it. Sadly, what will come in its place is likely, well, I suppose is likely to be a Labour Party, but the Labour Party isn't much of an opposition for them at the moment because they are riven with splits between themselves. Now, I am sorry about that because I was a member of the Labour Party for many years. I'm not anymore. There was a huge division there between people who support the current leader, Sir Keir Starmer, and people who support the former leader, Jeremy Corbyn, who fought the 2019 general election but lost it. Partly because he was operated against by many of the members of his own party, partly because all of the popular press, united to really make him sound like the worst possible thing. And much as the Conservatives spend most of their time fighting with each other at the moment, there are huge divisions between people who should be natural Labour voters. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it's not obvious that there is a unified party that could take advantage of the ridiculously low state that the Conservative Party finds itself in the opinion polls,
Yeah.
which says to me that not only is this a time that is crying out to get this electoral reform message across, it is the time. We may never get a better time to actually get enough people in addition to the people who are already members of the Liberal Democrats or the Scottish National Party or any of the other parties that would naturally be in favour of electoral reform. We're never going to get a better chance. And already on Twitter, since I've started spouting my piece daily about I'm standing for, for member of parliament of Gravesham in the next general election, whenever it happens to be, and Adam Holloway, find yourself another job now because you're on your ass. All right. By the time that election is called, then he will know that I will not back down, that I cannot be bought off, that there is nothing that anybody can say or do to me that is going to deflect me. There's no, there are no skeletons in my cupboard. There's nothing on which I can be attacked in that sense, which is why I'm quite happy to sit here. I mean, where's it gone? All of this was just, the respirator and the glasses and what have you was just me having a bit of fun earlier on. But here I am. Fucking come and get me. Come at me, bitches. I'm just one person. I'm a member of public who has decided that these people have just fucking taken advantage of everybody, of the rest of the country for too long, and I want to undo that. And if nothing else comes out of us sitting here and you listening and me spouting for however long it's been, oh my God, it's been quite a while, is this. Ask yourself, do you believe that I believe in what I'm saying? Do you think that comes across?
It does. It really
Do I
does.
seem genuine?
Yes, it does. It does
Do
come
you
across.
think other people are going to think that I'm genuine? Do you think they're going to believe me when I say I won't take 84,000, I will take the salary of a nurse? I won't benefit from this. I won't claim expenses. To the extent, that was the final part. To the extent that I need maybe an office manager or an assistant or people working here in Gravesham when I'm not here in Gravesham, well, that 84,000 that we said earlier was far more than one person should earn. Well, that's where their salaries can coming from, and I will take no more than they will earn. So basically, if that probably means that we can afford 2 extra people working on behalf of the people of Gravesham out of one MP's salary. If it became necessary because of the amount of casework that we were doing to, for example, claim some expenses for the office, that would be down to the people of Gravesham through the mechanism of these things to express their yes, we agree or no, we don't, maybe on a month-by-month basis. So when I talk about democratizing and bringing people into the ongoing political process during the life of that parliament or that member's tenure in parliament, that's what I mean. And if we can get people used to participating in the political process in that way and seeing that their individual decisions and their collective decisions matter, what is the possibility that we get a better class of member of parliament or people standing for member of parliament, people who can make shit happen without having had, pardon me for burping there, I didn't mean to do that,
Okay.
without having had to go the traditional path of being born into a millionaire's family and silver spoon through Oxbridge and all of that kind of bullshit to end up sitting on the steps of Eton as David Cameron and Alexander Boris de Pfeffel Johnson were as part of the Bullingdon Club, part of whose membership initiation ceremonies, including having to go and burn £50 notes under the noses of homeless people just to prove they could. What utter cunts. I mean, and there is no better word for it. That is the class of people that this nation seems to want as its leaders time after time. Well, I say no. I say there are better people out there to get stuff done. You can see them on Twitter. You can see them on news. You can see them out in their communities every bloody day. Get those people into Westminster for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and let's see what happens then.
I mean, I like what you're saying, and so like here in America, the press if you don't follow a certain narrative,
Yeah.
then you are labeled this, or that, and
Right.
they sort of help decide on who's going to be supported and who's not. Do you think that is it kind of like the same in the UK? And I'm saying because I do think you're genuine, but it's how you're portrayed
Yeah.
as someone who's campaigning in the press, in your local
Right.
press, or however far.
Yeah.
So if you don't follow a certain narrative, because obviously you're not following a narrative, right? You're going directly
I'm
against
trying to
them.
create a narrative. I'm
Exactly.
kind of hoping,
So
and I'm talking about it now because I'm kind of hoping that other people will listen to stuff like this and think that's not a bad idea. You know, I could do that.
mhm,
So one person standing on this kind of platform becomes two people,
right,
becomes three people, becomes 30, becomes 50. And how many more do we need to pick up from either the Conservatives or the disunited Labour Party to add to the people who are naturally going to vote for parties that will naturally support electoral reform anyway?
mhm,
You know, at that point, the numbers actually do start to add up. Now, who's going to be against it? Well, you've picked upon the main issue, and that is the press. The five biggest newspaper print media in this country are all to the very far right of right wing. Okay. So the Telegraph, the Daily Mail, the Daily Express, the Sun, and basically between them, Financial Times, the Observer, blah, 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 blah. Well, maybe not the Observer so much, but anyway. So the big five media, the Harmsworths and the Barclay brothers and so forth, they're not going to be happy about this. Of course, they're
right,
not, and they are big contributors with big expectations for their contributions. The Times, that was who I forgot. I knew there was one that I hadn't mentioned. Murdoch. Fuck
right.
me. That twat. So yeah. So what are they going to say about me? Well, I doubt they're going to post very many, nice puff pieces.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: do I strike you as a person who gives 1 ounce of a shit about that? And
No,
the answer
but
to that is no. But it's going to be hard.
right. But is independent journalism something that is growing in the UK? Because independent
Well, you
journalism seems
obviously
like
you have the kind of like I suppose the very tempting echo chambers of places like Twitter or TikTok or what have you,
mhm,
where you find your like-minded community and they will all slap each other on the back.
yeah.
And I'm trying not to get seduced by that. And I'm saying trying because it is very easy to think, because you see, hundreds or thousands of people suddenly liking something you say within 3 minutes of you putting it up, that, wow, I must have the will of people behind me. No, you've got
Right.
the will of a few thousand people and maybe a bunch of bots and this, that, and the other. The only way we will know is when we get to an election. What I have, my biggest challenge, if you like, the single biggest thing that I have is to start and continue a narrative, with the people who are going to elect in this constituency. Can I do that with the assistance of local media? Of course, absolutely. Will I be trying to get a favourable response from local media such as it is? Of course I am.
Mm.
By appealing to the practical, pragmatic things that actually either do matter or should matter to people who live hereabouts. So I have got to win election as the Member of Parliament for Gravesham, which means that I have to speak in Gravesham to the people of Gravesham on the matters that matter to the people of Gravesham. But I also have to make sure that they understand that one of those matters is this business of electoral reform, because otherwise they run the risk of being a Labour voter who hasn't seen a Labour Member of Parliament for 18 years, or of being, a member of the Liberal Democrats or the Green Party or other parties that have put candidates up, knowing that they're never going to get elected, because first past the post only works for the two most popular, and in Gravesham that has always been Conservatives or Labour since Labour became a thing. I mean, if you go back far enough in time, there was no Labour Party, and it was the Liberals or and the Conservatives were the Whigs or the Tories, and and basically, so the names changed, but fundamentally, the top two parties are the only ones that ever benefit under first past the post. They benefit, nobody else does.
Moving Dutchman,
and that's got to change.
Moving Dutchman says that he will vote for you, but you have to bring Spitting Image back to his screen.
Well, Spitting Image was brought back. So Spitting Image was kind of like this parody comedy show of the 70s and 80s, and it was awesome back then. And they had two puppeteers, Fluck and Law. They created these amazing caricature puppets that would then be animated on a Sunday night, and they'd have the puppeteers doing it. And so Margaret Thatcher had hers, and every member of her cabinet, and there was, those who weren't staunch Thatcherites, the Wets or the Vegetables, would all be small and little grey figures because they were little small grey people, and it was very, very funny. And if there was somebody who was suddenly in the news for some reason, you could guarantee that within a week or two, Fluck and Law would have come up with their puppet and they'd be acted. So all the members of the royal family, for example, so Nonce Andrew, before everybody knew he was a nonce. I mean, he was still on Spitting Image, but for other reasons. Now they brought it back a few years back, and here's the problem: it wasn't very funny. It just whatever it was that made it work in the 70s and 80s. Now, so if you're asking me, Moving Dutchman, to bring back the version that was around a few years back, you need to go back and look at what it was like in the 70s and 80s, if you can dig that out on the YouTubes, because those guys absolutely rocked. If you're actually talking about the original, I heartily agree with you. We need something similar.
Hold on, let me bring you.
Hold on.
Oh, there you are. And so here, okay, so this is the.
Am I being censored? Are you? Freedom of speech. Fucking I'm being. Oh, help! I'm being oppressed.
So this is what Spitting Image is now, and they just released something 11 days ago.
Oh, it was propaganda.
It looks like they got Trump on here now. Oh, you can't hear this. Hold on. That is the new stuff. Yeah, hold on. We'll give it a little bit. Let's see if we get DMCA'd. Hold on. So you can interact as well. There we go.
Okay, that's propaganda.
Coming after my rally. You're beautiful. I love you. We're gonna have fun. Melania is here. Ivanka, and that dynamo of energy and excitement, Jared Kushner.
The dynamo.
Isn't it?
They wheeled him out.
Give me a wow.
Yeah. So they would caricature the absolute, the worst or the most embarrassing or the funniest, basically, parts of every one of them, and it was brilliant. I mean, it really was. So yeah, if they can capture this again, that is the new stuff. Yeah. So Moving Dutchman, I guess you were thinking as I was about the good old days of Spitting Image when it was kind of required Sunday evening viewing. It really was. This is in the day we didn't have. We only had 3 television channels in the United Kingdom at that stage. We didn't have, VCRs. We didn't have Netflix. We didn't have VCR, video cassette recorders. Oh no. No, I'm not looking at her. Ooh. Oh, this is old school. Oh, right. Yeah, old school. Oh, sorry, I thought you were going to make...
What do you think about the...
Are terrifying. These are fucking terrifying.
and that was... I mean, that was the thing that they did better than anybody. So Fluck and Law, Roger Fluck, and it was Peter and Roger, I think, were their first names, and I can never remember which way round it was. But anyway, they were the masters of the caricature. They'd pick on the physical feature that was the most outstanding and just emphasize it to the nth degree. So I guess that was probably Norman Tebbit, who was one of Thatcher's henchmen, strong-armed who was supposed to be the guy with the knife, probably going to go around and start slicing all the biggest and thickest pictures out of the frames. I think if you'd played that one through to the end.
Well, I just wanted to get a vibe of what you guys were talking about. Moving Dutchman,
yeah.
spitting
Well,
image.
now you know. So
Now
yeah, it looks
I
like
know.
Moving Dutchman is in approval of the comedic value of whatever was just viewed.
Well,
a few more names in here. Who do I recognise?
you had Lola. Lola said hi to you. I don't know.
Pyro. Oh, Ziggy. Oh.
So I was curious because you're a numbers person, and with what's going on right now, how do you think this whole BRICS, these nations, the BRICS nations, and the U.S. dollar, how do you think that this is going to play out? Do you see the dollar getting rejected from? Losing the petrodollar and America and sending America and the world into sort of a plummet, or how do you see that playing out?
Do I see the petrodollar becoming much less important? Yes. I mean, I think that much that's a racing certainty because the other nations have realized basically it's a bit like, when this country went to the negotiating table with the EU claiming to hold all the cards, but actually holding none of them. China has realized that, it is strong enough and the yuan is strong enough that it can really set its own terms, and is going to do so. So with BRICS, so Brazil, Russia, India, China,
South Africa,
South Africa, South Korea. I mean, you could probably say in terms of economic rankings as well, but basically, yeah, they aren't the kind of the also runs anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry. So yes, I think that the emphasis on the dollar is almost like the benchmark unit of exchange for global trade and things like that. Is that era is coming to an end, if indeed it has not already come to an end. What does that mean for the value of the dollar, and will the dollar decline? I think it's going to be a lot more volatile. I think it's going to be interesting times. I think that people who hold all or most of their wealth in the dollar might want to rethink that.
Where would you go? Where would you go?
Well, I would. Well, okay. So, I can tell you what I did in my case. I mean, I was faced with a similar situation with the impending arrival of Brexit and what have you. I mean, I wasn't rich by any stretch of the imagination, but I had some money, and I wanted to make sure that it was not going to be subject to runs on banks and failures of financial institutions, having lived through that in 2008. And it's only as recently, I mean, it was only 15 years ago that we last had a global financial crash. Thanks, America. Thanks, savings and loan. Appreciated that. That was fun. Led to 5 years of austerity from the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats that led to hundreds of thousands of deaths in the United Kingdom. So good on you guys with your subprime lending bullshit. But back to the subject at hand. I basically put a lot of my money into, finger quotes, the safe end of crypto.
Right.
So I was not a Dogecoin or a speculator on what the latest and greatest was, but did I put substantial amounts into Bitcoin and Ethereum? Yes, I did. Was I happy when those then went on a run? What do you think? All right. Did I manage to help some of my close friends and close family members to form their own decisions about what to do with their money, and for some of them to also shall we say, do quite nicely out of it? Yes. So do I feel happy about the way that panned out, not just for me, but for them? Yes, absolutely. Is that necessarily the safest thing for people to do? Well, no, not if you don't know what you're doing. And not if you fall the trap of thinking that, if you haven't made like 50% profit today, well, really what were you thinking, kind of thing. There was a period there for about 4 or 5, 6 months where it just looked like a one-way bet forever. It was never going to be a one-way bet forever. And when the correction came, it came hard, and it caught a few people out, and then it corrected again, and then it corrected again. So I would hope that people are a little bit more sensible now. So anybody who rode that wave up to 69,000 on Bitcoin and 4,867 on Ethereum or whatever it was, and it's now considered, and both are now, well, slightly better than a third of that. But having doubled in the last 4 months or so, there is value to be had from not holding things in a dollar or dollar denominated security. Because if the value of the dollar goes down, it would be nice if you had some kind of a defense against that. So you can either pick a different currency, pick a different, more stable currency. I don't know. What would you choose? Don't choose the pound. Don't, whatever the fuck you do, choose the pound.
I mean, is the yuan, is that going?
Well, you might actually make a point for basically saying, well, if the big risk to the dollar is the yuan, then wouldn't it make sense to actually have some of your stuff in the yuan? I mean, and that is your classic hedge. You're trying to take a position where you win both ways. You may not win as much if the yuan gets stronger as you would, by having some of your money in the dollar and some of your money in the yuan. Well, then you won't make as much if the yuan appreciates, because some of it's over here in the dollar. But equally, if it goes the other way, you won't lose as much as you would if all of your money was in the dollar and it tanked. So basically, so with a hedge, and depending upon how you hedge it, what you put it into, whether it's on deposit or in other forms of assets like shares or what have you, that might themselves accumulate in value and give you an income from dividends and what have you, then you try and end up with a situation where you can be a winner always. All right, and now I sound like a capitalist. So here's the thing. Did I start off working in the financial arm of, in the center of London, the financial capital of the world at the time? Yes, I did. Did I stay there for an extended period of time? No, I didn't. Why? Because I realized I didn't want to spend the rest of my life doing that.
Yeah.
I didn't quite know what I wanted to do, but I did know I didn't want to do that. But that experience stood me in good stead for understanding how international trade and international finance and so on work later on. So you said, what did I do at university? And I said maths, and you said you would have gone for business or something like that. I never studied business, but I worked in business for years and years, and I kept my eyes open and my ears open, and I learned in every single thing that I did. And while most of my career was spent in the IT industry, and most of my money was made in the IT industry. The IT industry is not something that sits in isolation. Typically, the IT people are doing something with manufacturers or retailers or financial institutions or something. So they're buying these systems, or they're asking you to create and code and put these things together. You have to understand their business as well in order to be able to do that. So as well as the business of coding or managing data or whatever the heck else I was doing, I was also having to learn about those other industries as well to figure out how to make my bits work with their bits. So that was an interesting thing to do.
Yeah. Like you hear a lot about people going and putting money into gold. What do you think about the gold aspect?
Well, here's the thing. Gold is not going out of fashion anytime soon. It's solid. It's dependable. Gold, diamonds, any of those scarce or finite resources. So basically, you can't create more gold. I mean, you could if you could send a ship to the sun or some other kind of what have you, and mine it or extract it from there. But let's assume for the time being we're limited to the resources that we have. Gold doesn't grow on trees. Diamonds don't sprout from seeds. I mean, yes, you can make industrial diamonds, but they're never going to be the same as the kind of diamonds that De Beers and what have you are selling, on the Amsterdam and what have you markets. So yeah, they are finite stores of value, but they don't do anything. So let's say you own a couple of ingots of gold. You can put it on a table and they're just going to sit there and look at you. So you own gold, and your wealth is now dependent upon what the market says the value of gold is. You can't do anything with them. Diamonds, well, you could put them in a ring, you could wear them, you could bling yourself up a little bit, I suppose. But well, I suppose you could do that with gold as well from an ingot if you know. But my point being, they are stores of value, but there's not a lot else you can do with them. To me, the attraction of crypto, especially crypto on the Ethereum side, was that you can do things with these. You can put your money into something like Ethereum or any of the other Ethereum-like tokens, and then put them to work, maybe by lending them out and earning money that way, or by staking, so securing the operation of the network by saying, well, okay, I will be part of the pool of people that will make sure that there is enough liquidity for people to be able to buy and sell and trade, but I will make a percentage every time they do. So there's ways of actually putting, so you can buy the stuff and hold it, but you can also put it to work. Now, the more risky the thing you put it to work, the more reward you would hope to get for it. But the more risky it is, the more possibility there is you're going to lose some or all of it. So that is a decision for individuals to make. And I never tell anybody what to do about that. I will explain my thought process and why I have done things. And I will do that with people who I care about. And the rest of you can figure it out for your fucking selves. I mean, you know, I had to spend time learning how to do all this shit. I'm not giving you that for free. You want to pay me for it? Well, then, you know, we can talk, but otherwise, no. So have I, let me put it this way. Am I still involved in crypto? Yes, I am. Do I have any particular intentions of getting out of that? No, I don't. Why? Because the nature of the markets have changed, and the nature of what you can expect to get, either in capital terms or in interest-bearing terms, may have changed. But it keeps me in food, you know, and even though I will be, well, let's put it this way, even though I will be earning my salary of a 5-year qualified nurse as a member of parliament for an indeterminate period of time after the next general election is called, I'm still going to need to be able to, you know, pay my bills and what have you once that comes to an end. So yeah, I'm going to carry on keeping that stuff where it is, because if one or more of the UK financial institutions, or indeed one or more of your US banks, decides to fold and produce a big run on the market, I'm not saying I'm immune to it, but I'm more immune than if I had my money sitting in one of those things and suddenly you go along to Wells Fargo or wherever and it's like, you know, the Wells Fargo wagon isn't coming down the line, it's fucked off down the line with your gold and your money like half an hour ago, and good luck you getting any of it.
No, it's scary, man.
It is.
You know, like, I don't know. Do you then foresee a financial collapse that we've never seen, especially here in the United States? But I'm guessing it would affect the world. Do you see that, you know, unfolding? Do you see like a you know?
Is that a systemic risk that we should be kind of thinking about? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it could. I mean, here's the thing. I honestly thought that after Breakshite happened. So after we actually left at the end of January in 2020, I predicted to some very close friends of mine that at least one UK bank would fail in the first quarter and a second would fail in the second quarter. And that would lead to a run on most of the UK banks, which would lead to the kind of, you know, catastrophic meltdown that I didn't want to imagine. All right, and that was why I made damn sure that none of my money was in UK banks, you know, and it was, you know, nicely where a run on UK banks wasn't gonna affect me. And I didn't tell anybody else to do that, but again, I explained my thought process as to why I no longer felt that having my money in, you know, in ISAs and PESAs and stocks and shares and what have you in the United Kingdom was necessarily a good thing.
Well, yeah, you know, I don't have a pot to piss in, so either way, I'm fucked. I'm part of the serfs.
Yeah, but you have skills. You're a musician. You can earn money. I mean, here's the thing: even if every building you can still busk on a street corner. You can still turn a tune. You know, you can.
I have several skills.
I don't mean that in a disparaging
No,
way.
no.
I mean, you can do stuff that I can't do. I mean, I'm not really a musician. I make noises, but
Well,
you know, for my own entertainment and fun. But nobody's going to pay me to stand on stage and perform. Although I am going to. Although you mentioned actually, this is a good point. Let's segue back to Liz and JMO and Glowstick for a minute.
okay.
I bought my ticket to Willie Town earlier in the week. I
Let's
actually bought it
go.
live on Liz's stream on Tuesday or Wednesday. So just so I could see her face when I told her I was going.
Yeah.
Now, and I said, don't get ideas above your station. I want to go and see Mike and Rainer and Saucy and Dree and others,
Yeah.
who one would hope are going to be there.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. So one of the reasons why the tickets are so well priced at the moment is because they haven't announced who's going to be there. They may, so to the extent that they know but they haven't announced, or that they don't yet know but they're going to fill the bill, the price that you pay for a 2-day, 3-day ticket at the moment is ridiculously low, and it is ridiculously low. Now, if you think, oh well, I can't get there because it's going to be in Ohio and I'm over here, I'm in the fucking United Kingdom, right? if I can haul ass over there for a few days, I'm fairly sure other people can move a little bit. Buy your tickets now, and you aren't going to pay the price that you will do in a month or so or two when they actually announce the lineups.
Yeah.
Buy your tickets now and help support the band that's just had the tornado rip through their studio.
Yeah. No,
I mean,
it's crazy over here right now, with the weather and stuff. So I wanted to switch over to another topic that because in the UK right now, and we were talking about the NHS over there, and there's this big debate now, and obviously it's a big debate everywhere, this trans debate right now. And the NHS just recently, or I mean, as of last year, I think, they stopped doing gender affirming care for minors. And I was just curious on what your thoughts on that was.
Okay. So this is, I mean, it's a complicated subject, and as a member of the, I mean, if people ask me, where do I fit on the spectrum? I mean, I typically say something along the lines, I am pansexual, polyamorous, kinky as all fuck, so basically I'm queerer than you can possibly imagine. All right, so any combination of those letters, and I have an axe, I probably have an axe to grind in it somewhere. So that's my perspective. So speaking as an individual who has no problems with the existence of trans folk or trans folk getting the medical treatment or the whatever kind of treatment that they feel is necessary for them to feel comfortable to live an authentic life, they have my 100% absolute support. The NHS temporarily, or at least at that time, withdrawing care for minors, do I think that's a good thing or a bad thing? I believe that no. My personal view is that no procedures that are irreversible should be taken on a young person's body until that young person is of an age to be legally and emotionally able to make their own decision. And that will make me very unpopular with some people within the trans community, and I don't give a fuck about that. You asked me what I thought, I'm telling you what I thought.
Yeah.
There is a reason why we have a minimum age of consent to give consent to entering into sexual relationships. There is a reason why there are minimum ages that you can marry, except if you're Jerry Lewis, and
Elvis,
stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, so what I'm basically saying is, in an ideal world, if somebody knows at the age of 4, at the age of 5, that who they are is not reflected by the body they have, it would be great if there was a means of thinking it into, basically putting everything right at that point. It would be great if there was a way of carrying this out before the effects of a puberty that could be devastating for somebody who already knows or is already convinced that that who they are, the essence of their personality is not reflected in the physicality of the body they move around in. All right. And if anybody thinks that is an easy thing or an easy situation, then I suggest you spend some time talking with people who are in that situation and just develop an ounce of, what's the word I'm looking for? Humanity. Yeah, you don't have to know what it would feel like to see the pain and distress that somebody else is going through. And with the application of a little bit of humanity, a lot of bridges can get crossed. Do I think there are problems with self-identification of people, being able to say, I'm self-declaring that I am a woman and therefore you must send me to a woman's prison because I've broken the law, even though I have a fully functioning, all of the bits and pieces of a fully functioning male? Do I think that's problematic? Yes, I do. All right, and I'm probably going to get shot by large members, sections, because here's the thing: I'm a pragmatist. Okay, I'm a scientist by training. I'm not bound by religious dogma any more than I'm bound by dogma of belief from within the rainbow community. I am there to support everybody who needs support, but I am not there to allow people who are using the mechanisms of, for example, self-identification to just increase their chances to abuse. Are there people who do that? Yes. Are there many of them? No, I don't think there are. But unfortunately, the same names keep getting pulled out by, people like the woman who writes about wizards and all of the rest of their rampant ilk. And there aren't, and they are dangerous people who have a fixation. They, as in the woman who writes about wizards and her slathering supporters. I'm no fan of hers, if that isn't becoming clear. And the amount of harm and distress that they cause while claiming to stand up for the right, while thinking they're in the right about the things that they're thinking about, I'm no fan of this. But is it a difficult situation? Yes, but here's the point: where did all of this focus on trans issues like this come from? Where do you think it came from? Why do you think it suddenly sprang into being 3, 4, 5 years ago? Who might have had a motivation to create a wedge issue that could be used to sow discord and discontent and basically maybe use as kind of a way to slide in an agenda against a slightly wider community, like, for example, gay people and lesbians and bisexual and all of the other letters that aren't T in the great, arena of LGBTQIAA+, and all the rest of it.
I always blame the religious right.
Well, now there we're starting to get somewhere, aren't we? Okay, so why do I? Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Well, no, and
So were those the answers that you expected? I did say that you could ask me about this. I did say you might not hear the answers you expected.
I didn't know what to expect. I try not to have too much expectations with these kind of conversations because everybody has their own opinion. I mean, I was talking on stream the other day. It's like if Saucy came to me as a teenager and was like, "Hey, I'm a woman. I want this therapy." Me and my wife would probably say, "Hey, we're gonna put this off. We're gonna get you treatment, as in like therapy, and we'll treat you however you want, pronouns, whatever you want. But before we start, chopping off things or giving hormones and stuff, we want you to become of an age that you could make that decision for yourself." But personally, I think that which
is what I said earlier, I believe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we agree on that, but I don't see it as something as a sweeping thing for everybody, because I believe in freedom of expression. And if a family is to come together and was like, "Hey, this is what we want for our child, and this is what this child wants," and who am I to tell them what the fuck to do? So me personally, I don't give a fuck. Do your thing. Like, I'm not here to get in your business. And that's that's the situation. That's my opinion, but like for my own child, I would want to make sure that they get to at least an adult where they can make a decision on their own and be
Yeah.
sure about it. But I'm
And
not
have and have whatever supports or assistance they need
yeah,
now
yeah,
for them to feel comfortable, valued, and to give them the time and the breathing space. So, okay, right, it might seem like a long time till I'm 18 or whatever the age is, but at least I'm not being treated like an absolute, piece of garbage
right,
by my own family at
exactly,
the moment while I'm trying to figure this stuff out.
right,
So if people are in now, sadly, that is not the case.
right,
For a lot of people who find that, especially in your country,
yeah,
because of the role of churches and religious organizations who will mostly, although thankfully not universally, just absolutely tell them that that's it.
yeah,
They are the devil incarnate. They're going to hell. They're going to have this, that, and the other. And if they say anything to anybody, are likely to be put through the worst kinds of. Now, do you think that I don't feel for people like them? Well, of course I do. So there are places, and I know of some, for example, in Arkansas, that will, because I have friends in Arkansas, and it matters to me, what happens to them and to people that they care about.
yeah,
There are people and organizations that will step in and support these young people when their own families and their own communities and their own schools and everything they've known up to now have just turned against them. Right? These kids didn't ask for this to happen to them. All right. This is what they deal with. And for somebody else to just turn around and say, oh, well, you're the devil incarnate, or it's just a phase, or, you saw something on TikTok and you thought it looked cool, so you want to be on the cool new thing or stuff like that. It doesn't work that way.
What do you think?
Sorry.
No. Well, what do you think about people who do say that because we do have sort of this huge influx of this this rhetoric, this of people who are coming out, and what do you think of what do you say to the people who call it a social contagion?
Well, here's the thing. If you think that there have not been trans folk around for the last 20, 30, 50, 100, 200, 300, 5,000 years, what are you smoking? Okay, because they've always been there.
Yeah.
It's just we live in an age now, especially in the age of Twitter and TikTok and and everybody having a platform and everybody having a voice and what have you, where it is more visible now. But I wouldn't say that it was necessarily any more prevalent now than it was. Do we have many more gay people or lesbian or than we had before? Almost certainly not. What has changed? The environment that makes it more acceptable to be out and to be seen as being out, and the number of places where you will see people portrayed in a positive way. So you'll see gay people on gay musicians and on films and on TV shows and comedy specials and what have you, because why not? Why shouldn't they? I mean, there can be some of the funniest people going. Damn sight funnier than that fucking Louis C.K. What the shit was that all about? I sat there listening to the audience and you. Well, I couldn't hear you laughing, but I could imagine you laughing. I'm thinking, he's just saying words. They're not even funny. What was that one I kept... I thought about Jesus the other day. Audience falls over in a fucking heap of hysterics. Tell me what is funny. Tell me.
It's the context of who he is as an artist, because the people who are there are really his fans because of the whole.
No, really? Are you saying that people would pay to go and see
okay,
a show?
But I'm saying they followed him for a very long time, and they know so you kind of know who he is as a comedian and as a person. They know that he's not much of a fan of Jesus and not a big fan of God.
A bit of an abuser and all of those kind of things.
Yes.
I mean, that was the stuff that I knew about him.
Exactly.
And it kind of coloured my opinion going into it. But you were having the thing. I thought, oh, what the heck? I might pick up on something. I picked up on something, which is I'm not the world's greatest. Here's the thing: I'm not the world's greatest fan of scripted comedy, and I've said this before. But it isn't that I don't have a sense of humour, and I laugh a lot. I really do. But I laugh at things that happen naturally and spontaneously. You know, somebody falls over and, you know, cracks their nut, I'm going to have a damn good. As long as it isn't me, I mean, I'm not going to laugh then. But, you know, but that's what I'm saying. It's kind of the theatre of the absurd, or some of the crap that gets talked about on news programs or stuff like that, and I can't stop laughing.
Yeah.
But when somebody is trying to play me for a laugh, and they've scripted it and they've written it down, especially if there's like a dumb laugh track or stuff like that,
Ugh,
you know, I'm not even sitting there trying not to laugh. I'm sitting there thinking, is this my life for the next half hour? Have I got to sit through this?
No, I feel you. No, there is certain. I mean, like I have a hard time just getting through like comedy movies and stuff like, or even movies in general anymore. Like I like, to me, I just see so much of the production that goes into it, and it's all fake and it's all just like bullshit, and so I just don't even attach to it. And that's why I was saying when we were talking in chat while we were watching Louis, was that, you know, The Whale, which is about an obese man. Like, for me, it was hilarious because seeing Brendan Fraser in a fat suit, like, just, oh, I just want to be a human. To me, I was laughing the whole time while Raina's sitting next to me, like, horrified. Like, she's just like, who is this person I've married?
Yeah.
And just to me,
I end up with this toe rag. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, like, I get it. I get that it's not very becoming to be laughing at these parts of the movie, but like, I can't help it because I know it's fake. I know it's just some scripted out bullshit that some guy made up in his head and he wrote it down, and then there's lighting all around. There's tons of people like just holding microphones, and there's fucking boom operator. You know, like there's a whole production, and that's all I see. And so in my head, all I'm seeing is some guy in makeup in a fat suit going, "I just wanna be a peasant." And to me, it's the funniest fucking thing. Their jowls are jiggling. It's a riot. That's why I keep saying it's the comedy of the year. But
is it a good performance? Because everybody I know who's seen the film says that it is a good performance.
It's a great performance. I mean, and you know what? Like, if you're gonna like the movie, I like Darren Aronofsky as the director, anyways.
Actually, I didn't realize it was him who directed it.
Yeah. Okay. So he's a good director. Although I don't know what was up with Noah. That was just a terrible movie. But
everybody's entitled to one duff.
Yeah, and whatever. It was okay, you know, but it was ridiculous. Anyways, I kind of want to come back to this transgender discussion, because I always feel like I'm not really the one to have this conversation and talk about it. And my opinion is, like, I just want people to live their happy life and do what's best for them. And it's not my fucking business, right? I don't care. And literally, there's the apathetic side to it where it's like, I don't give a fuck if people want to do that. Like, who cares? Like, why do you give a fuck? Why do you give a fuck if this dude...
Why are you gay?
Why are you
gay?
Why are you gay? Oh, Jesus. No, that's not it. Oh, my God. Well, I don't know what happened to it. Oh, there it is.
Why are you gay?
Exactly. So, but I am... But it is... Now, not to mean that I don't have, opinions and that, I look at certain things and I'm like, well, that's kind of funny. Like, that's kind of weird. But again, I don't take it to the point where I'm going to get on the internet and be like, these fucking trans or these Mexicans are fucking, like, it's not that. It's just like, something strike me. So what's your opinion when you see like, when you see trans in sports? So, and this is mostly trans women who are competing against biological women, like Leah Thomas, or recently.
Well, if you hadn't mentioned Leah Thomas, I was gonna. So,
well, and so in those cases, I'm just like, well, that's kind of weird, Like, I mean, I'm really happy that Leah is living her best life, and God bless her. But then my heart does kind of go out to those young ladies who work their whole lives for these moments, just for it to be smashed by somebody who, found out later in their life or whatever that they were a woman. And so, I mean, it's weird. I'm not. Do
you want me to address that particular issue?
Sure, because and then there was another one that just happened in Canada where this dude with a beard, like, he just said, he was like, I'm a woman, and went and smashed all the records. And then there was actually a trans woman who competed and smashed all the records last year, who's really upset because
her records have got smashed
Yeah.
now by.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So do I get a chance to speak now? Because you've been on a roll.
Oh my God! Come on! You spoke for the first 2 hours, Kat.
I know, but I did tell you that I did tell you that you could interrupt if you need to get a word in. I mean, here is that you want to
fair
ask
enough.
me these questions. Then
You're
spend
the
5
guest.
minutes going on and on and on and on and
Okay,
on.
okay, please.
And I'm
I
ready
was-
to respond.
Well, I was just putting out where
know,
I'm standing, but please,
I'm
I would
putting-
love to hear yours.
Michael, I am pulling your leg.
Damn
Because
it!
let's face it. Yeah, damn it. Why are you gay? No. So here's how it goes. I'm gonna answer this question in a slightly different way. You said, imagine yourself as one of those, one of those girls, one of those women who trained all their lives and they're trying to compete and they're trying to get to their best, to their position of achieving result. And suddenly, this person, Leah Thomas, comes in, has followed whatever the laws of the requirements laid down by the swimming union was, whatever, is it FINA or I can't remember the name of the swimming body, and suddenly broke all these records. Whereas when competing as a man, they weren't necessarily any great shakes, and I don't believe they were. I think they were like 45th and something like that, and yet suddenly, right. So there is so there's an obvious issue there of perception of fairness and stuff like that. Is it fair that every other woman who was competing in those events was having to compete against somebody who was so obviously, going to beat them because of the advantages in Leah Thomas's case of a testosterone-fueled puberty and the musculoskeletal and stuff like that? So that's a statement. So I'm going to ask you a question. Imagine you were a swimmer around about the turn of the 2000s, and all of a sudden you got Michael Phelps stood on the board next to you. Okay, right. Michael Phelps, to the best of my knowledge, is a man, and you could have been the manliest swimmer going, but you're stood on the board next to Michael Phelps. Do you think you're going to beat him?
No.
You are not going to beat that motherfucker.
No.
Right. So what did everybody else do at that time with Michael Phelps there with his enormous great, he's like size 18 feet, and like every possible human advantage of an athlete? Did the world rise up and say, we will not have Michael Phelps in the Olympics, and we will not have this, and we will not have that? The whole nature of sport has always been that there are outliers. And in the case of Michael Phelps, he was, the only person who could come close to him would have been Ian Thorpe and from Australia. And that guy was like a complete physical outlier as well. The only reason they didn't compete more against each other was that they weren't doing the same events. I think with the possible exception of the 400, I don't think they were ever doing the same events, and they didn't quite overlap time-wise. So think of all of the great athletes in history. What about every other athlete who was competing? Who ran against? How did people think lining up against Usain Bolt, for example? Were they going to win? Probably not. Not unless he tripped over or had a bad day or got. So it's tempting and it's very convenient to turn around and say, well, we're actually going to, we're going to absolutely haul Leah Thomas over the coals because obviously she's got huge physical advantages over everybody else. Yeah, and so has every other compelling athlete during history. It just so happens that this one can be brouillard with the trans brush. So let's do that. Let's use this as a stick to beat all these, these fucking transies with, and then we're off to the races. So that is my response to the Leah Thomas issue.
Okay.
Do you understand? Do you understand where
I do, and it's a good point. I guess that there is.
I know it's a good point. Otherwise I wouldn't have made it. I'm not gonna go around making bad points.
Calm down.
I'm kidding.
Well, no. I guess my only response is that that there is a reason why we separated these sports into female and male, and again, I'm not against it. I honestly don't give a fuck, but it does, in my head, almost like what you were saying about people who may abuse the system to get into women prisons. It came across kind of like that. Again, I don't care, and I have no,
Well, here's
I
the
have no
truth.
stake in
That's
it.
how it came across to me as well.
Okay.
All right. Did I think that that was an honourable victory by Leah Thomas in those events? No. Okay. Yes. Members of the trans community, I said it. No, I don't, because obviously at that moment she was now in a position of physical superiority. Is it Leah's fault that she had to take the path through life that she did? No.
Yeah.
Was it Leah Thomas's choice to compete in those events and to adhere to the rules that were set down about waiting X number of years and having X number of years of hormone treatment and what have you? I mean, I can't comment about the one you're on about in Canada because I don't know anything about that. But it doesn't sound like your beardy fella there has been on estrogen for 5 years or whatever the current thing is. Yeah.
So here's this
Right.
guy who and it was in just to be fair, this guy honestly he identified as a woman as a protest, and Canada being Canada, like they're just like, well, yeah, come on in and you can compete as a woman. And then so it was just, he was obviously making a statement. And a bearded pro powerlifter entered a women's competition in Canada and smashed a record held by a transgender lifter who was watching on. The New York Post reports Avi Silverberg, the head coach for Team Canada Powerlifting for more than 10 years, entered last weekend's Heroes Classic tournament in Lethbridge, Alberta, after identifying as female. Video shared by the athlete activist group, the Independent Council on Women's Sports, shows him walking up to the platform, still fully bearded and wearing a regular men's singlet. He then casually bench pressed 167 kilograms, beating current Alberta women's record almost 45 kilograms. The current record is 124 kilograms. Is held by trans athlete Ann Andrews, whatever, who was watching Silverberg while volunteering at the event, and so there's that. So I mean, to me, obviously this guy was. I don't even think he identifies as a man anymore. I think it was an obvious protest. And so I mean, I guess
quite an effective one in that sense. So here's the thing: there were no rules, but there were obviously no rules at that event about the steps one would have had to take to think back to, I don't know, Cathesaurus from South Africa, who as a middle distance runner was top of the world. Who had to go through years of medical examination and what have you to satisfy the International Olympic Commission that she should even be allowed to run, who had to produce doctoral evidence from 10,000 different places that the specifics of her anatomy were that, yes, she was a woman, even though she didn't necessarily look it. It wasn't any kind of, I'm going to wake up today and decide that I am some, there are plenty of developmental conditions out there that mean that somebody does not have, it's not just XX and XY, there are so many variations and so many hormonal or other endocrinal conditions that interacting with can produce, more than 100 that I'm aware of, and I'm not an expert in the field. My point being this: that competition had no rules, so that individual decided to take to compete and to show it for the fast that it was. Other competitions that take place, such as the ones, the collegiate championships that Leah Thomas entered and did so well in, whereas having failed when entering and competing in those as in a former incarnation. Maybe the rules need to be different, but I'll come back to what I said earlier. I think the problem with self-identification is that it leads to problems like this. The argument for self-identification is that otherwise there may be people who can't access the kind of medical or social or legal protection, either the treatment or the protections that they need, if they cannot afford to go through some gate-kept strictly regulated procedure that is arbitrarily put in place by governments or medical bodies or what have you. Right. So that is why self-identification first became an issue and something that ought to be talked about and discussed, and the relative merits and what have you. But it's just basically been completely overtaken by opportunists from both the religious right and basically the right, full stop, as a means of stoking division and hatred and otherwise, as a prelude to then going after the gays and going after the lesbians. So the funniest thing, and I say funny in this in a kind of like ironic sense, is that the biggest campaigners against trans folk in the United Kingdom is something called the LGB Alliance. All right, basically saying, we're lesbians, we're gays, we're bisexuals. We don't want to have to be told who we can sleep with and what have you. Here's the thing, right? Nobody's ever told me who I have to sleep with. I decide who the fuck I want to sleep with. All right. And it might be that person over there because they look hot. It might be that person because they make me laugh. It might be that person because they could look like they've got an 18-inch willy. It could be any number of things that attract me to a particular individual. But somebody telling me who I must, otherwise I am not a real lesbian or a real gay person or a real bisexual or a real poly or a real pan or a real kinky or a real whatever the other fucking combination you want to pull out the box is. No, I decide who I want to sleep with, and I will neither be dictated to nor feel compelled to answer to anybody for saying otherwise. So nobody is forcing anybody from the L or the G or the B of the LGB Alliance who they have to sleep with. Not all lesbian people want to sleep with all women. Not all gay men want to sleep with all other gay men. Not all hetero folk want to sleep with all other. Individual attraction and individual choice is always a thing. But no, the LGB Alliance that says we don't want those T's in our party because they ain't got nothing to do with us. Fine, don't invite them to your party. Fucking have your own party. Do your thing, and it hurt no one. Do as you will.
Yeah.
But no, they got to be all up in their feelings and then get all up in the courts and all up in everything else, while taking money from dark money, right-wing religious organisations in the state to fund their purposes. So something tells me that this isn't really about defending the rights of LGB people wanting to not have to deal with any of these, odd trans folk that they don't really like the look of. It's actually somebody doing something else to stoke some discontent. So I'm going to believe that this isn't really anything about trans folk at all, and it's more about, religious fucking wingnuts who are trying to cause some issues. And I guess, as Forrest Gump would say, that's all I got to say about it.
Fair enough. Cathesaurus, I appreciate you coming on the show again.
No worries.
And sharing your thoughts. And I wish you the best of luck coming
Thank
up in this upcoming election. And, I'll be supporting you from over here in my...
No donations. Don't want your fucking filthy
I didn't
foreign...
say I was going to give you money. I just support.
Well, that's fine.
I'm just giving you a little support.
I know. I understand. I'm just in campaign mode. So
I understand.
No foreign money. No foreign money in
fair.
UK elections.
And I respect that. I respect the shit out of that, because that's more than what...
Oh, I'm out of focus.
Yeah.
Oh, that's better.
You're good. You're good.
I mean, I'm that attractive. I've got to make sure I'm in focus.
I agree. And Kat, I don't know. I put in some links to your Twitter and your Instagram. I didn't know what else to put in there. So if anybody wants to follow Kat on Twitter, that's probably the best place to follow you, I'd say.
Probably
right?
Twitter is, yeah. I mean, to be fair, I literally only opened up my Instagram again the other day for the first time in yonks, because there was somebody else's. Seriously, I mean, I closed that thing down when I kicked Facebook into touch 6 years ago.
Okay.
And I was actually kind of amazed that it was still there, that the email and what have you. And if they turn it back into kind of Facebook Lite, that you have to have a Facebook profile to get back in, well, then I'll just delete that as well, like I deleted Facebook.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, Facebook owns Instagram as well, unless I've completely forgotten what the heck is going on in that world. But I like it. I mean, I like looking at the pictures, and I suddenly kind of got hooked into it again. So I thought, oh, what the heck? So I put a picture up today of a park bench. Why did I put a picture up of a park bench? there were reasons. There's a nice little story there, or a little bit of a tearjerker. Your friends, your fans, the readers or subsequent viewers or listeners, go and have a look and see why I put a picture of a park bench on Instagram.
Yes.
And you might shed as many tears as I did when you suddenly figure out why. It's things like that, So yes, I'm going to have words to say of a political nature, because this is important, and I've told you about my 10-year-old great nephew. But fundamentally, I'm just trying to get through this thing called life in the same way as most other people are, and have some fun while doing it.
Yeah, might as well. All right, y'all. Well, again, Cathesaurus, if you guys want to...
Bloody hell, that's 2 3/4. How can you keep me talking for so long?
I know. I don't know. It's a gift. It's a gift. Cathesaurus, everybody, make sure you go follow. And if you're listening on the audio side, make sure you go into the show notes, click around, make sure you're supporting Cat. And if you're in the UK, please do get involved and get the message out. And because this
you're
is
in Gravesham, I want your vote, and I will represent you.
There you go. Everybody, put your hands together for our guest today. Thank you so much, Cathesaurus. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you later, Cat.
Give me a woo.
Oh, I got you a woo. There you go. All right, Cat. I'll see you later. Bye. There goes Cathesaurus. There goes Cathesaurus. There goes Cathesaurus in Gravesham, wherever she's from. Cathesaurus is that. Yeah, thank you for that woo, mighty, mighty. There it is. There it is, folks. We did it. We did it. We covered the topics.